This is an incoming transmission from the Jersey Shore.
This is Financial Insanity with Scott McLean, powered by McLean Advisory Group. Today you'll hear some of the most important financial information and wealth-building techniques available anywhere.
Let's get this party started, huh?
Do you have a question for Scott and the team?
Am I on the air?
609-488-4646. That's 609-488-4646.
We'll get that information to them by radio.
Now, Financial Insanity with Scott McLean.
You hear Scott's voice on the radio each week. You've probably even seen him around town. Maybe you've seen his face on some advertising. Maybe you know somebody he's worked with. But how much do you know about Scott the person and how Scott came to be who he is now and the business owner that he is? This is going to be a great show for you to get to know Scott. And remember, if you hear something today, if you have questions, you can always reach Scott and his team, 609-488-4646. And Scott, I just want to really get into it here with you and talk about your background a little bit. How did you get involved with financial services, Scott?
I don't know.
That is fair.
I don't know. I just fell in love with just numbers. I think because of Dad, when we used to play ball, he'd take me out to the ball game and said, "Son, what's 10% of $1,000?" And I'd say, "Dad, I'm fixing to play ball." I was like 8 years old. And then he said, "Well, Scott, you got to answer the question. You can't get out of the car." "Dad, I'm about to play ball. You got to let me go." And we'd have a little tussle. He always won. And I started to understand I didn't like him because he was running numbers all the time and asking questions. And, you know, the older I get, the smarter he is. And I can see that when I think about numbers, it's so valuable. And then, of course, it led into not only numbers, but then finances. Then on top of finances, money and doing budget. I remember Mom and Dad were arguing about finances and, "Ken, why don't you do the checkbook?" Or, "Joan, why don't you do the checkbook?" And I remember hearing that as a little guy, and they weren't arguing, just going back and forth and remembering budgets, numbers. 1966. I was a little bit older. I guess I was a whopping 8 years old, and we just moved to Florida, Jacksonville, Florida. Just hearing how Daddy, when he bought a car, I'd listen. I didn't know what I was doing. Or when he bought a boat, when he bought things, he was really good at numbers, and I didn't even think about it. So if you're going to go back that far, now going up to this age in my life, now I'm a little bit older, 60 plus years older, and I'm thinking, you know what? Numbers are really important, and finance is so critical when you put numbers to it, and I think that's what made me intrigued. And you know what, Alex? In school, I'll never forget Mr. Brew. I was going to Nyack College and heading into the mission field and looking to be a missionary. And my roommate, Danny, was now actually overseas in Poland, helping out in the Ukraine crisis. And I'll never forget, he always make fun of me because my daddy says, "Scott, you must take financial courses." I said, "Daddy, I'm studying Greek. I'm studying Hebrew. I'm getting involved in the ministry." He goes, "Look, what makes me upset," because he's a trustee on the board, "is pastors who handle money don't know much about money. And you need to know about money. So I want you to take financial courses." Now, let me help you, Alex. This is probably crazy like you. You know, I worked at Eddie's Sunoco right there in Nyack, New York. I pumped gas from a wonderful time at 2:00 in the afternoon till 8:00.
Oof.
I'd go home, I'd study. And then from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m., I'd unload trucks at UPS in Nanuet, New York. I was butt broke and I had no money, but Daddy helped pay some of the bills in college. And I, of course, paid a lot of it too. And I remember when Dad says, "If you don't take college course on finances, then I'm not going to help support you." Well, that was the caveat. So I guess maybe that's where it really hit home when Daddy said, "I'm not going to really help you out." And you know what, Mr. Brew, we were taking a class called statistics. Have you ever taken a class statistics, Alex?
Unfortunately, I was forced to, yes.
You know, I remember raising my hand, and Mr. Brew was a CPA in Similac Milk, and he's going to be overseas, and he was at ATS in the seminary, and he was teaching his way on college kids like me. I'm a young little rat. I guess I was 18 years old, and I raised my hand because he was teaching finance and statistics. I raised my hand and said, Mr. Brew, it looks like you can lie with numbers. He had a big smirk on his face. I'll never forget the smile he had. He said, son, that's what we need. Good businessmen and good businesswomen who understand how people can spin things to make it look good, but frankly, it doesn't. And that's what really turned me on. And I started to gravitate towards the financial world. I think that's where it really, I can't say where it really hit home, from whether it's playing ball to there, but then it really hit home on people. There's no classes that people take in school these days. Even still today, there's no class in elementary school, high school, college, unless you actually sign up for it, that teaches you about money and finance. And I think that's where the emphasis of our firm has been. Let's educate people. Before you invest, let's understand what the heck you're doing, so you don't get caught in the whirlwind of statistical lies. And I think that's really hit me hard, Alex, in my career.
Well, and for people that want some answers to their questions, they can call Scott, 609-488-4646. And, you said it really started with your dad there. And did you find yourself, passing on some of those words of wisdom to your kids and, grandkids?
Of course I do. And I do the same thing to them Daddy did to me, history repeats itself. I do. And every kid has a different lesson. So if it's my daughter with the horses, I'll relate it to her. If it's my grandson playing baseball and buying a new glove, or maybe buying a ball, or maybe buying ice cream, negotiating, talking, and, trying to get the best bang for your buck, no matter what child I'm speaking to. And I got a bunch of them. I think that's important. Finances will last the rest of your life.
Yeah, I remember my dad always told me that every dollar I make's already been spent. And I remember that was a little bit depressing, but pretty accurate as I started working. I was okay, I know what my dad was saying. Now, tell me more, Scott, here about your first job. You first started working, and do you have some experiences or some lessons that have kind of carried on with you?
Best of my knowledge, my first job was at a bowling alley in Jacksonville, Florida. It was just opening up. I was cleaning. I was sweeping the floors. That was my first job, and they needed, part-time help. And that was fun. The experience, I didn't like it. I guess I didn't like somebody have their thumb on my head and tell me when, and putting a number on me and saying you're worth this. I thought I was worth more. The second biggest thing was, I think the biggest impact was Mr. Jones, a very close friend of mine. He's passed away. Mrs. Jones is still alive. She's about 96, I think, right around now. And Charlie, and they had the largest fence company in Jacksonville, Florida. I remember going out there, putting up fence. And what I learned about it, hard work. And I loved working. I loved being outside. I just tell me what to do. And that made me excited. And my biggest excitement, why did I work? I had to pay for the gas for the boat. Daddy said, if you want to go water skiing a lot, which was my drug of choice, water skiing. I had to water ski. Frankly, I do that more than anything in the world, and I competed all over the United States. But when I was younger, I had to pay for it myself, and that was a big lesson of making money. And so Mr. Jones gave me a job, and I'll never forget looking at the paycheck, and my paycheck was, well, at $1.85 an hour. That was a lot of money. But I noticed a line. I didn't know what that line was. Is Social Security, federal tax. I was I didn't understand those numbers. So of course I asked my dad, and he said, "Son, that's going to be with you the rest of your life. That's inherited." And I understand about taxes, which is why I built the tax practice now going many years forward. But that really hit me, even though the paycheck was so little, even though it was big back then. Why is somebody putting their hand in my pocket? I got to get their hand out of my pocket. I think what's important on the education process and the process I work with our clients is, number one, to educate them. Number two, which is why we've been doing, Alex, so many different workshops, whether it's a tax workshop, a Social Security workshop, We do a estate planning. I call it wills and trust workshop. We do a workshop on investments, and then, of course, investments and taxes. And so many different areas that come into the area of finance, but it breaks down to how does it really fit the person I'm speaking with at that time. And I think by doing that, I really know how to really help them understand what they're going through. If it's a brand new person I met for the first time, or if it's a client's been with me for 15, 20, 30 years. And I've got clients that long with me because now it's going in, it's my 40th year on, going forward, 41st year going on forward. I think it's really important to understand, for me to understand the client and them to understand me. So if it's a good fit, great. It's a great relationship. I think it's important before we even do business together to know each other. And again, to help them understand or educate them, I'd love to hear from people at 609-488-4646. If you have questions, I probably have answers for sure. 609-488-4646. Write them down. I feel free to talk to you off the air.
More financial insanity with Scott McLean on the way.
Scott McLean at McLean Advisory Group often talks about the difference between retirement savings and retirement income. It isn't necessarily how much money you have saved that's most important. It's having a steady stream of income in retirement no matter how long you live. Scott has strategies that can help you create consistent monthly income for the rest of your life. He can help you make important decisions today so you can have the income you need in retirement. Having a big nest egg is great, but how will it provide you with the income you need for as long as you live? The number to get more information from Scott at McLean Advisory Group is 609-488-4646. That's 609-488-4646. Turn your portfolio into a plan with help from Scott McLean. 609-488-4646. Investing involves risk. Firm offers insurance services. Investment advisory services are offered through Bell Point Asset Management, LLC.
We made it back. This is Financial Insanity with Scott McLean, presented by McLean Advisory Group.
I haven't seen my son in 15 years. I don't want to leave anything for him in my last will and testament. Or my daughter just married a person who's a drug addict. I don't want to leave her anything in my will. I gave my son thousands of dollars and he never paid back a dime of this loan. Or my son already received his inheritance. I don't want to leave anything more for him in my will. Just a few examples of why a parent may want to disinherit a child. Today, we are joined by Dave Connelley, attorney for over 40 years and a good friend of Scott's. Been working with Scott since 1984. You can reach Dave at the office, 609-488-4646. But Scott, this is a great opportunity for Dave to come on here and talk about a topic that's maybe a little uncomfortable, but important.
Alex, it is uncomfortable because when I work with people, as you know, I talk about their estate. We can handle the money. We've been doing this thing now over 40 years. But that's just one part of the big picture. What happens if they die? Well, that's another part. But what happens if their children are going to inherit money? And maybe, as you noted at the beginning, there's a challenge. There's a problem. And maybe they don't want their children to get the money because of, as you said, the spouse. Maybe because the child is on the wrong side of the street. Maybe the child's going to be disinherited. They just fell away from the family. Some reason. We're not going to go into reasons. Everybody knows that listening to the show right now. But the reason I wanted to do this show, and Alex, I'm so glad that we spoke about this when Dave came to me and says, Scotty, this is a problem I've noticed. And Dave made it so prevalent to me, saying, this needs to get to your people. Dave writes tons of articles for our clients, our friends, and of course, he's been in the practice now working at the firm at Elizabeth Appello, and knowing her for many, many years, and we talk about estate planning. So Dave said, Scott, you've got to bring this topic up. So Alex, I'm glad you want to talk about that. I think, Dave, obviously you're live with us in color, and you're here on the show at WBNJ, as we're a proud supporter on the radio show. And we've got a lot of problems. Alex, go ahead and what kind of questions you got for us, Alex?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Dave, this is the kind of thing where you really got to take the emotion out. You got people who have been working their whole lives, have the kind of money that they do, and now it's time to start thinking about legacy. For some people, it might be as easy as a 50-50 split for inheritance. But Dave, like a lot of times you got to use your brain and determine what is the best trajectory for your family moving forward. And that's where you can step in and give advice, right, Dave?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of times that the person making a will, a testator, is not getting along with the child, hasn't seen the child for 20, 30, 40 years and wants to cut him out. But there's other times when, for purposes of financial planning, they are eliminating the child from the will because the child's on government assistance, the child's special needs. Well, you don't want to give that child any additional funds because that will cut off the special needs or the entitlement program. So there's a lot that has to be done. Unfortunately, a lot of the clients, not in Scott's office, Scott prepares them pretty good, but I've seen other clients that just don't tell me they have another child that they want to disinherit. They figure that as long as they don't mention the child in a will, he's disinherited. That ain't so. There's a procedure you have to follow, and if you don't follow it correctly, you could undo what you're trying to do.
Now, Dave, you made a statement in our office, and obviously, we ask our clients lots of questions, but we don't know. Sometimes people don't want to bring up, I say, the dirty underwear in the family. They don't want to talk about these things, which is so important because they've worked so hard during their lives. They've built up this huge estate, and huge to some people could be 100,000. Huge to other people could be 10 million. We've got clients of all different sizes. But the question of the matter is, in disinheriting them, what's the proper way? And obviously it's called probate, and probate has a way of ripping people apart. I say in my book on chapter 11, the crows and the clowns show up at the funeral. And I think this is one of the challenges that come about. So Dave, what should someone really pay attention to? Because I guess you got wills out there, Dave, and maybe trust that people haven't updated. So I guess the first question I'm thinking about is, how often should people review their will? I mean, we do that every year. We ask questions to our clients, but from a lawyer perspective, I think you can understand maybe lawyers just cut the will and they forget about it. What's the process that they should follow?
The person should at least review the will every year or two to make sure that all the circumstances that or the basis for the will are still the same. Most people think that a child has no right to inherit. That's not true. The law states that if you die without a will, the children and spouse, if there is a spouse, will divide your estate. So there is a right for a children to have part of the decedent's estate, but the law also says that the decedent can disinherit the child. So you do nothing, the child that you haven't seen in 35 years will inherit like the child who has taken care of you all your life. You do a will properly, you can disinherit that person that has left your life 35 years ago. In my opinion, the proper way, disinheriting a child, very simple statement. I hereby leave nothing to my daughter, Mary Jones, for reasons that are both known to myself and Mary. Don't give a reason why. If you give a reason why in the will, I am not going to give my daughter anything. I'm disinheriting her because she hasn't visited me in 5 years. Well, now you've given a basis for Mary Jones to contest the will because I am disinheriting, and then your supporting evidence will be done outside the will. What type of supporting evidence? I tell my clients, if you're going to disinherit anybody in the will, sit down and write your reasons out on a piece of paper. Let that paper be kept with the will. If the will gets contested, you have strong evidence of the intent to disinherit a beneficiary, a child. If it doesn't get contested, it gets thrown away and nobody gets hurt. I would even go so far as to say it might be good to video it.
It's great advice. Listen, audience, I'd like you to be aware, even though this is a financial show, this is a financial matter. We talk about the three blind mice, your accountant, your lawyer, your financial advisor. This is why the crows and the clowns show up at the funeral, because they don't talk to each other, and they kind of leave a piece of your assets completely out, or a piece of your desires. And I think this is important for those of you listening right now. I can tell you right now, if you need to get a hold of Dave, feel free to give our studios a call. You can call our studios at 609-488-4646. We can make a way to, if you speak to Dave, no cost, feel free to ask Dave, because you know what? When it comes to your finances, we at Financial Advisory Group in Waretown, New Jersey, doing this now 40 plus years, we see lots of discussions and we like to bring them up. And a lot of times it's not brought up. So Dave's given you some great advice, and you definitely want to heed this advice. But the biggest thing I've noticed, Alex, I think you've noticed, you can get all the advice in the world, but if you don't apply it, it's not going to be beneficial. You can have the smartest person in the world, but they still could be not taking the right path. Alex, any other questions? What do you got for Dave?
Absolutely, Scott, and not to stroke your ego or anything, but you are a smart guy, but you also know we need to bring in other smart people. And after 40 years, you've formed some great relationships, and that can be part of your value. Dave Connelley has been practicing law for over 40 years, specializing in real estate law, wills, estates, trusts, probate, powers of attorney, and other things before retiring a few years ago. Great person to have on your team. And we're here today looking at this topic on financial insanity with Scott McLean, McLean Tax Advisory Group. Attorney Dave Connelley gracing us with his presence. And some people, Dave, thinks it's sufficient to simply state in their last will and testament that they are disinheriting their child. But I know sometimes about the order things are done, and some documents take precedence over others. And that's why it's just so important to talk to someone who knows what they are doing before you just assume you have everything set in place correctly. Right, Dave?
You're absolutely right. Some people, when I talk to them, they say, well, leave them $1. That's all I want to leave it. The worst thing you could do, because now you have made them part of the beneficiary pool, and that person will have to sign a refunding bond and release, albeit only for $1, but also has a right to get an accounting, to participate in the whole process.
Wow.
And you don't want to, you want to keep that person out who is being disinherited. So don't leave anything to that person.
Absolutely. That could cause mayhem to come right out of the clue just from a simple clause in the paperwork.
$1.
Wow.
Well, and you also don't want to create a situation where there's going to be ongoing legal battles between family members because you didn't clearly state something that you were wanting, or maybe things were conflicting each other in documents. So now, instead of creating this nice legacy for your family, your legacy is creating this huge headache for your family members to deal with.
The evidence before the court, if there's ever a will contest, is the testator's dictation of why they cut the person out. And the more evidence you have there, the cleaner the case is for the executor to eliminate the disinherited child. So I can't overemphasize that is important to keep with the will. Hopefully it doesn't get contested, but if it does, you want to be prepared so you're not running around trying to keep the disinherited person out when you don't have the evidence.
And when you're looking for an attorney, Dave mentioned you probably want to review your documents every year or 2 years. What we do at our firm is we actually ask our clients on the annual review or speaking to them once a year, has anything changed? You might have a child out there that's disinherited. That's the negative part of the show, but it's real. This is real stuff. But then you might have a child that became disabled, and maybe they inherit money, but they're disabled, they're getting government subsidies, and they could lose the entire subsidy because the mom and dad pass away. It goes to the child, and they're getting some Social Security disability, they're getting some kind of benefits. I know we haven't spoken about that, Dave, but they should probably update their beneficiaries and maybe point their assets to a trust for that child that's disabled or incompetent, or there's a challenge going on.
Absolutely.
If you need that help, I think I can tell you one thing. The time you spend, if you want to give Dave a call at our studios, 609-488-4646. He'll answer your questions, no cost, no obligation. The biggest challenge I find is you get this great information here in the beautiful, lovely days we're having, and all of a sudden, you forget and you put this aside. This is something you shouldn't. My goodness, you would destroy your crows and the clowns showing up. Well, you've invited them in by not taking care of the details to your estate. It's not just about investing monies, which our firm does. It's about looking at the full picture.
Thank you for that note. And there are an infinite number of reasons why a parent may want to disinherit their child. We have more Financial Insanity with Scott McLean and Dave Connelley coming up.
Scott McLean at McLean Advisory Group often talks about the difference between retirement savings and retirement income. It isn't necessarily how much money you have saved that's most important. It's having a steady stream of income in retirement no matter how long you live. Scott has strategies that can help you create consistent monthly income for the rest of your life. He can help you make important decisions today so you can have the income you need in retirement. Having a big nest egg is great, but how will it provide you with the income you need for as long as you live? The number to get more information from Scott at McLean Advisory Group is 609-488-4646. That's 609-488-4646. Turn your portfolio into a plan with help from Scott McLean. 609-488-4646. Investing involves risk. Firm offers insurance services. Investment advisory services are offered through Bell Point Asset Management, LLC.
News, tips, the financial tricks, all right here.
It's the kind of dazzle we need around here.
This is Financial Insanity with Scott McLean, powered by McLean Advisory Group.
There are an infinite number of reasons why a parent may want to disinherit their child. Financial Insanity with Scott McLean. Special guest today, attorney Dave Connelley, longtime friend and also business partner of Scott's. Dave has over 40 years experience as an attorney in the area. And today, talking about a very important, maybe somewhat touchy, uncomfortable topic. But that's where we come in for these conversations, and we can have those uncomfortable conversations with you. So talk about this today. And Scott, Dave, some reasons now why this might be something someone may want to look to do as far as disinheriting their child.
You know, Alex, this is really a touchy area. You know, being in the industry now for many years, and I can tell you countless times I've called Dave and asked him about questions, and other attorneys that draft the documents. They draft the documents, but they never really look at them again. They draft the documents, and here it is 10 years later, and Scott McLean or one of our advisors here at our firm dusts them off. They blow off the dust and they read the contracts. I can tell you many times I'll call Dave, or I'll even call the attorneys they're using. They need to update them. If you out there are listening and you haven't dusted it off and read through it, I can tell you so many problems I've noticed. Let me give you a couple ideas I've noticed. Number one, maybe the executor, maybe your son or daughter, became disabled and they can't handle it, and there's no backup. Maybe they passed away and there's no backup. Maybe the backup to the executor, maybe it's your wife or your husband, your spouse, well, either one. And of course, maybe it's the child, and maybe that child has gone off the railroad tracks. You know what I mean? They've gone a different path and they're now disinherited. Maybe they married some lovely person that ended up being a wolf in sheep's clothing, and now they don't contact you anymore. This is very vital when it comes to designating beneficiaries on your bank accounts, savings accounts, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, and maybe you haven't updated them. Or maybe those of you out there that maybe have a second marriage and maybe you didn't update the beneficiaries. This is the financial, as far as I'm concerned, this is where the financial advisor should be asking these questions. And then I can tell you, in my practice, chapter 11 in the book, I can tell you so many times people don't look at it. Now, Dave, this is Dave, a close friend of mine for now 40 plus years. I think we're still friends, but either way, I love his family. But I can tell you, as a sharp attorney and knowing his craft very well, and you've seen problems like this too, Dave. You've seen a lot of these wills that have been outdated. Dave, what's the reason people are not updating their documents?
I've seen worse than that, Scott. Years ago when I used to have a safe deposit box for all the wills, and I used to do that as a courtesy to the people. I used to maintain the will in my safe deposit box. The people would execute the will, give me the will to hold on to it, and I never seen them again. Wow. So why people aren't on top of their game, especially with such an important document, I don't know. Things change. You have children that are growing up, you need a guardian for them. Now they're over 21. Of your 3 kids, one of them is a drug addict. Well, you're going to treat him different for his own benefit than equally with the others. Just give him the money if something happens, give him 1/3, because that money's not going to go to good purposes. So things change. You have to review the will occasionally, every 1, 2, 3 years. And if they have changed, you have to change your documents accordingly.
Dave, I get what you're saying is all of a sudden the child gets along with mom and dad, and 10 years later, the child's doing things they ought not do, drinking, drugs.
Absolutely.
Maybe they married someone that's pulled them aside. Maybe they want to put money. Maybe this is a good discussion for some of you listening out there to open up a trust. Maybe they have a special needs child and they need a special needs trust. Or maybe they have a child that if they receive $1, they know, and you know, they'll probably spend $2. So maybe there needs to be some kind of spendthrift trust. So there's all types of trusts out there. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, you have irrevocable trust. You got revocable trust. That means that one you can change, one you cannot change. Living trust, testamentary trust, the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. There's so many different types of trusts out there.
Yeah, that is a hard decision. If you're not dealing with the right person, the right people, I can tell you that could cause a problem. Alex, I think you had a question for me, and we didn't bring it up. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good, and lots to think about, and that's why if you have questions, the office number, 609-488-4646. Scott McLean, along with Dave Connelley, attorney in the area for over 40 years. Those two have been working together since 1984 and can still stand each other after all this time, and that speaks to something right there in itself.
I don't know if I'll go that far.
One thing here is a question asked sometimes, might sound a little weird, but life is weird. A parent using the threat of disinheritance to influence a child's behavior. In other words, a parent really wants to change a child's behavior by controlling his or her estate distribution. So is it legal for a parent to say, for example, if my daughter marries that man, I will disinherit her? Is that legal?
No, that's not legal. You can put incentives. If you stop drinking, I'll give you a full 1/3 share. But it's not legal to say if you marry, I want you to marry him or not him. Now you're getting into a gray area that's approaching illegal. I wouldn't put that in a will.
Because that's the kind of thing that people might be using emotion, not their brain. And that's where you can come in. Because the other thing is, and I think we mentioned it briefly earlier, but a court might look at something and say a person was accidentally disinherited because he didn't make it super clear. So that just speaks to, hey, don't take it by chance that you got this done correctly. Speak with someone, at least get some advice. Have them look your documents over so you know what's going on.
Absolutely.
What are some other important things, Dave, to think about? We're in this stage of life. We're compiling these planning documents. What are some other things when it comes to inheritance, when it comes to our children, that we should be contemplating?
Well, you got to figure if you when you pass and that inheritance goes to the child, it's their money. They can do with it whatever they want. If their parent is having any trouble with the son-in-law or daughter-in-law, I would caution them that they might want to put the money in a trust to prevent son-in-law or daughter-in-law from having access to the money. I would also tell my children that when they inherit the inheritance, if they keep it separate and apart, they don't commingle it with the family assets, it does not become part of the family assets if there's a divorce, and the child can keep it exclusive of the spouse. So as I talk to the people and spend some time with them and get a feeling for, and they start opening up after 10, 15 minutes.
That's right.
About their real feelings, then I can play it by ear and direct them to where I think they should be thinking.
You know, Dave, you're bringing up a thought pattern to me. Let's say you have 2 children and they have spouses and they have children. So let's say you will have your son, and your son has 2 children, and your daughter, she has 2 children. Here's what I find a lot of times a mistake. Maybe for some reason or another, bringing in what Alex said, maybe you don't like their spouses. Obviously, you like them, you have to put up with them, but you keep that silent. But the other part is, what if your son or daughter passes away? They're going to be receiving your inheritance. You want the inheritance to go to the grandchildren, your grandchildren, which is fine. The question is, who's going to be the trustee, assuming the grandchildren are underage? who's going to be the trustee. And what I'm understanding is if you don't have a specific clause, I would think that the spouse that you kind of don't like that much will be the one overseeing the money, unless you make it clear we need to have a backup quarterback. We need to have someone else to oversee the money, and a trust needs to be established within that will. Davis, can you clarify that, what I'm kind of trying to get to?
You're right. The spouse is the guardian of the children, so unless something is specifically stated in the last will and testament, any monies that go to minor children, number one, would be deposited with the surrogate court until a child is 18, and the guardian, the parent, would have the ability to request from the court any funds that are needed during the time that the child's a minor. Rather than going through all that, it's easier to establish a trust in the last will and testament. 18, I think, is too young for a person to get a substantial amount of money. So I usually recommend minimum 21, probably 25, and the trust funds are there for the health, maintenance, education, and well-being of the child. But the trustee, who is appointed by the parent, the trustee will decide what is an applicable expense for the child. So in the case you had, Scott, typically it would be the surviving child. You got a son and a daughter. You would make each reciprocal trustees for a trust for their children.
Yeah, that's important. I can tell you so many times when I meet with people, I say, I know you love your daughter's spouse or your son's spouse. Let's say they love them. But the question is now the second problem is they get remarried to someone else who has kids, and now they could be commingling the money that they receive from mom and dad when they die. And they want it specifically for their grandchildren, grandma, grandpa, specifically to pass to the bloodline. And this is a mistake. And I ask these questions because I always ask people, Dave, this question. By the way, do you like your son-in-law, your daughter-in-law? Oh, yeah, I love them to death. So if they got married again and you received an inheritance, would you want them, their new spouses, and their new family, the Brady Bunch, to enjoy your money, or just your kids? And 9 times out of 10, I want to protect it for my blood, my grandkids. And so, and Dave, by the way, for those audience listening, it happened to me. As Dave knows, we have a daughter who is now about 45 years old. We got her when she was 8, when her mom died and her dad chose not to take care of her. I have been through this road. Dave has seen a bunch of issues, and I can tell you the reason we're bringing this up on our show, the crows and the clowns show up at the funeral. Have you protected your estate? Not just making sure your money's invested correctly, which is what we do. We do a tremendous, great job. But the secondary is what happens if something happens and you pass on. And so I want to thank Dave for being, if you're listening, please do yourself a favor. Give our studios a call and ask for Dave. Ask your questions. Don't let this sit on your shoulders, because one great idea could change everything if you apply it. Everybody says people are smart, they're great. Well, you could be as smart as the world, but if you don't apply it, you're dumb as rocks. It's applied knowledge that keeps you really, really in sync with your estate, as we're talking about today. Alex?
And Scott, you just got to be humble enough to admit that maybe you need some other eyes on it. You need some help, just like you have over these years, Scott, realizing that you can help people in a lot of different ways. But if you bring on experts who maybe know more than you do about certain topics, and in this case, that being Dave Connelley, and that's where the value really adds to what you provide, because you're saying, hey, I know a lot here, but this person knows even more in this regard. So I'm going to partner with this person, and it really just makes you more valuable to the community as well. So really great conversation today, Dave. Appreciate you coming on and talking about this very important topic with us.
Thanks, Davey. I appreciate your time with us, and I hope those people listening take action. Don't put this aside. I can't stress this more enough, because life changes in a flicker, and you have great ideas and great intentions, but intentions are led to nowhere unless you apply the knowledge you've gained and the wisdom and insight from from Dave himself and from the time we spent together. So if you'd like a copy of Disinheriting a Child in a Will, feel free to give our studios a call. We'll make it available to you, as well as if you'd like Chapter 11 of my book, The Three Blind Mice. I'd love to get that in your hands. No cost, no obligation for anybody out there. We can make a way to get it to you. I can tell you the time and the effort you put into reading it will really help solidify, are you doing or not doing the right thing? And you can bring it to your attorney and ask them for help. If you got an attorney, these are things that should be brought up, not with just Dave, anybody, but don't put this on the shelf. Thanks, guys.
My pleasure. Nice talking to you.
You can reach the studios if you want more information. 609-488-4646, 609-488-4646, and more financial insanity with Scott McLean coming up.
Scott McLean at McLean Advisory Group often talks about the difference between retirement savings and retirement income. It isn't necessarily how much money you have saved that's most important. It's having a steady stream of income in retirement no matter how long you live. Scott has strategies that can help you create consistent monthly income for the rest of your life. He can help you make important decisions today so you can have the income you need in retirement. Having a big nest egg is great, but how will it provide you with the income you need for as long as you live? The number to get more information from Scott at McLean Advisory Group is 609-488-4646. That's 609-488-4646. Turn your portfolio into a plan with help from Scott McLean. 609-488-4646. Investing involves risk. Firm offers insurance services. Investment advisory services are offered through Bell Point Asset Management, LLC.
Financial wisdom grown locally here on the Jersey Shore.
You think I'm an idiot?
This is Financial Insanity with Scott McLean, brought to you by McLean Advisory Group.
We talk a lot about the risks to your money in retirement. Wall Street Journal saying baby boomers' biggest financial risk, cognitive decline. Scary risk can rob you of your best judgment. Sometimes it can go even unnoticed for years. With that in mind, we're going to go ahead and bring you a top 5 list for this week. Top 5 scams that you should be aware of, Scott.
Well, I don't know about you, and I just had someone in the office, and this lovely lady, 73 years old, was in the office and has a new friend. Beautiful, beautiful gentleman. As he sat out in the lobby and we got through talking about it. And I called the romance scam. And obviously it's real. And when you think about the romance scam, of course, they perpetrate themselves as they got money and they want to go out, and who ends up paying the bills, and they end up having that area. On top of romance scams, I would like to throw in there, when you think about that, maybe kids who think they're so concerned about their mom and dad's money that maybe they think mom and dad have a lot of money and they can borrow the money. I think that's a scam as well. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but I think these partners, romance scams, as you well indicated, these dating websites, these elderly victims, just to get your information. Be very careful of that. We all love relationship people. This is important. Now, Alex, you said there was another scam out there, the tech scam, I think you mentioned.
Yeah, and that's something, and we see it all the time. Really, you can have text messages, you can have emails, but unfortunately, there's a lot of technology nowadays, Scott, and people can be reached so easily, and you never know how somebody maybe even got your information. But there's a lot of communication, and sometimes people can make it seem very real and something very relevant, and they can give you a lot of sense of urgency, and it's important to be aware of those kind of things happening as well.
Boy, that is so true. When I think about these text scams, I remember when we do taxes, and these text scams, they turn into a phone call. Did you get you owe money on the government? You need to send us money. Or one of the close friends and clients, which obviously won't say their name, where they called me up and they were beside themselves, where they actually ran to Walmart and they wired money through Western Union of $5,000 because they heard their grandson was in trouble, got in a car accident, but they won't report it if they send them money because the grandson hit somebody, and they ended up almost dying. The woman is pregnant, now lost a baby. This is real. And she called me, the husband and wife called me, and they said, Scott, what do we do? And, I said, let's call your son right now and see about how their child's doing, your grandson. No, they told us not to call anybody or they're going to go ahead and press charges.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would believe that. Now, my clients are a little bit older. There's this couple. We're very close. And I looked at them in the eyes and said, we're calling your son right now. No, Scott, I don't want you to. I said, okay, we're going to call the police. They were in my office. We're going to call the police station right now to see if there's any accidents. And we did. I said, okay, Mr. and Mrs., let's say JoJo, we're going to call now your son. You should have seen his wife's face. Alex, I believe you. These scams are real. And they did not want to call because they're afraid it's real. We got the son on the phone because I forced them to do it. Oh, no, he's with his best friend right now. There was no car accident. These are real scams, whether it's from tax returns, such as the tech scams, the grandparent scams, usually trying to, which is the third scam you had mentioned to me when we were speaking before. Of course, they're faking out relative. And then we talk about the government. We talk about the taxes, the fourth scam.
And that's a big one, Scott. That's a big one because
huge.
Because they'll pick the right times too, whether it's tax season or whether they know it's open enrollment or whatever it may be, and that's when you'll get a call, and then it makes it seem very relevant.
The tax scam, Alex, I get this call every daggum year. And we have it in our folder when we do our tax returns for our clients. And we do a for our financial clients, it's a real expensive tax returns, like $110 we charge. We don't want to be a profit center. We want to help our people understand that. But one thing we found out is, okay, this is the IRS calling. You need to owe money. We don't want to put a lien on your account. And the IRS doesn't call people. It's like, wait a minute, whoa. Didn't we just tell you in the portfolio when you got your tax returns, there's a thing you may get a phone call. Don't expect a phone call. It says in there real clearly. So, and then the stimulus checks. I can't tell you how many calls we got because we do taxes for our clients and the stimulus check.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Totally ridiculous. And you know what? I don't blame the older folks because they're sitting at home, they're watching their TV shows, they get a phone call, and fear is a tremendous motivator the older you get. And that, to me, your lights go dim, maybe your husband, your wife, your significant others taking care of you, and you're worried about them. And these scams, well, Alex, the sweepstakes scam, how about that one? Or the charity. I want to give money to the poor people or this charity. Or maybe like my friend, as I mentioned, one of your shows before we spoke about my roommate in college is over in Poland helping Ukrainians. And he's there right now. But there's a lot of scams. I remember the scam about the Hurricane Sandy. Where did all that daggum money go? That ticks me off. And I think of all this illegitimate, quote, charitable organizations. This is a huge problem for the seniors out there. Guys, don't fall for it. And then you end up calling to your financial guy, hey, I need like my close friend and Scott, we need to pull out $10,000 because our grandson got in a car accident I mentioned earlier. I said, no, I'll let you get your money, but we need to make some calls first. As a fiduciary, Alex, my job is to protect our clients the best I can in every way I can. And if they don't want it, they can take their money and go to another advisor because my job is to be, I call it in Ezekiel 33, the watchman, to oversee people's monies, to help them. You know what? This is a lost art. One thing, Alex, we didn't talk about, you could have kids out there trying to scam their parents.
Well, that would never happen, Scott. What are you talking about? There has never been a kid out there who's tried to get their parents' money when they didn't actually probably need it. What are you talking about? That would never happen.
It's crazy.
That would never happen. No. Well, and Scott,
I see that.
And I'm sure that you do, and you see it all. And you are somebody, if somebody's sitting out there and they're thinking, well, heck, is this a scam or what should I look out for? If you have questions, then Scott could maybe have some answers for you. If you want to give him a buzz, 609-488-4646. You can give Scott a call, 609-488-4646. Scott, since you deal with this a lot, are there some indicators that somebody might be dealing with a scammer?
Sometimes not. Sometimes they could be sounding so sincere, so realistic, you might not realize it. But then on the other side, basically they go to Google and they do a search online and people who contact you. Or perhaps maybe you go online, you look up their phone number. If those seniors, people that are cognitively, they're going to be proactive, maybe you Google the phone number, see if it's a real phone number. And when I see people also really being proactive is they want you to download stuff and they want you to just click on this and it leads you down the primrose path of being ripped off. And that internet thing, because a lot of seniors these days, more now than ever, are on the internet. They sit in there, maybe one person's watching a TV show and the other person's on the internet, and you get caught in this web of deception. And I think we've really never did this on a radio show in the past 10, 12 years, but this is a good segment, Alex. We talk about so many scammers they're trained. They know how to get your information, and then they get your voice and they get it's almost right now, just like the thief in the night. Well, now they don't even have to go in your house. They're going to get it by the internet. So I think this is really, really a good topic of the scams. And again, the nicest guy, the nicest girl in the world, one of the flags, maybe they're good looking, they have a nice, sweet talking self, and maybe they just want to sell you something and get you involved in something, and they get your credit card and and now you're spending time cleaning up this nonsense. So don't use your debit card if you're going to buy things. Use a credit card. The credit card companies are really helping out. They've been a big insulator. I would never use a debit card. And by the way, it happened to my sister, where her daughter is on my sister's account, and she started buying stuff, and she started adding to the credit card, which my sister is in her name, and she allowed her daughter to use it.
What could go wrong?
All of a sudden, she sees charges. My goodness. And she got taken to the cleaners. And I won't say what I did, but I can tell you, I see this from a firsthand position to my clients, and I just disturbs me, especially in the field I was heading in. How do I protect our clients as a fiduciary, as a protector of our clients? And I think this is really important, Alex. Great subject.
Well, and Scott, you don't want to just walk around and be somebody who doesn't trust anybody or that you're super paranoid or stuff like that. But how can working with financial professional, working with you, how can that insulate people, give some people some protection against scams? Because some of them can come from people that you really didn't expect it to come from.
Well, I know one thing. We get phone calls. And I can tell you several phone calls we get from clients, and they want to take money out, and I will drill them down on questions. Well, let me ask you something. What happened? What took place? What do you need it for? Not that I'm trying to control their money, not at all, but to protect them from what's going on. Now, if they don't want to tell me, they don't have to. I'm supposed to give them their money. If they ask for money, that's fine. But if I'm hearing something fishy, whether they get the sweepstakes or whatever, I really want to know, is it the fraudulent, deceitful people out there trying to get their hands on their money? And I usually call. The second thing, of course, when I think about that, I really want to find out, if they call us, what is it about, as I just mentioned? If it even goes to the next level, which I have done, I may call the power of attorney. If we keep our clients in our firm, when someone becomes a client, I want a copy of their will, power of attorney, living will. So if they call in and they want to ask questions, I'm going to pull them up. Who is this? And I want to find out about that, or our staff would find out about that. So ask lots of questions. Maybe you go to your best friend before you do anything and ask them questions what should you do. If not, and maybe get this fancy software out there. I don't know which is the best software. I'm not telling people what the best software is, but there's software to protect your title, a title lock, I think they call it, or maybe a life lock, which your protection. I don't know which is the best out there. That's not my job. Seek it out, ask your kids for help. But I think you need to have these tools because it's going to get more rampant as the market changes, as people get more aggressively, theft goes up.
And Scott, for the last time here today, how can people get a hold of you if they do have questions?
Pick up the telephone, 609-488-4646. Our staff will put you on the call log. We'll follow up, 609-488-4646. And if we can help somebody, obviously we're a financial firm. We're not the fraud detection firm. I'll make that real clear. If we can hear some phony things going on, we will probably either post it on the web, 609-488-4646.com, and you can see for some helpful tips, if we have any at that time, of things that are happening.
This presentation may contain information which has undergone regulatory or other significant change since its original recording. The information on this program is educational in nature and is not intended to be a recommendation for any specific investment product, strategy, plan, tax, or legal advice. Information presented is believed to be factual and up to date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy. Discussions and answers to questions do not involve the rendering of personalized investment advice and is limited to the dissemination of general information and may not be suitable for members of the listening audience. Communications such as this are not impartial and are provided in connection with advertising and marketing for McLean Advisory Group. Prior to making any investment or financial decisions, an investor should always seek advice from a financial, insurance, legal, or tax professional. McLean Advisory Group and or Scott McLean offer investment advisory and financial planning services through Bell Point Asset Management, LLC.
This radio show is a paid placement.